Welcome to another episode of Breaking into Cybersecurity. Today we have Shaday, who will be sharing her journey of breaking into cybersecurity. Shaday, how about you tell our audience about your background and how you decided to get on to this journey?
Hi, Christoph. Good morning or afternoon, wherever you're watching this video from. My name is Shadya Maldonado, and I'd like to lead with this. Christoph, thank you for this opportunity and really grateful for this opportunity. Thank you. I started off my career in cybersecurity in the most unconventional way. It started with curiosity. If I were to back up to the timeline, about 2009, I was convinced that I perhaps should sign up for the military. Really not convinced so much so to join the military. I've always been very patriotic and being Puerto Rican, but being red-blooded American, I've always considered myself that, is something that I wanted to do from the gates. At a high school, I signed up for the military and somebody convinced me to become an analyst. Originally, I wanted to be a journalist because I loved writing. I loved exploring. And I was very lucky to have a recruiter say, you should probably go and do military analyst work. So for you folks in Virginia who have done all source analysis or played in the national security space, that's really how I got started. And fast forward after only one deployment and a couple different opportunities to work with special forces and other entities. I was in the 82nd Airborne Division. And if you've ever been in the Army 82nd Airborne Division Brigade Combat Team, it's a very special place. But in that space, I got exposed to a lot of different things: tactical analysis, operational analysis, strategic analysis. And after I left the military, I went back to college, got the 4-year degree, got the job offer to go to Virginia. But instead, I ended up at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, where I worked in national security in that space, doing nuclear engineering and analysis work. But it was really my exposure to data scientists and computer scientists of all the sorts, working with them to solve national security problems, finding the needle in the haystack, was where I found cybersecurity and the need to build a bridge between the cyber world, the spectrum of cybersecurity, and help connect that across the disciplines and domains. And the short story, because I'll done a bunch of things after that, but the short story of how I really became to get immersed in cybersecurity. I went to my first SANS conference back in 2015. So that tells you my age, a newbie in this space. I saw the founder of Dragos give a presentation, Rob Lee, and we're about the same age. And I thought, if he could come from a very similar space and domain, maybe I do want to be right that linchpin for the community and helping translate technical to non-technical and vice versa. And after that, I volunteered for a few gigs: cyber threat intel analyst, cybersecurity operations work. Got to work on projects with software developers building cool analytics for government entities. And I went on to do international capacity building for nuclear security program. And I got to go to different countries and work with nuclear regulators and different things. But in that moment, I realized that my journey in cybersecurity didn't end there. There's a lot of work to be done back here at home. So quickly resigned, did some stuff at NASA. And today I'm founder of a company called ArcQubit. And happy to talk about
Wow.
what I'm doing there, Christoph.
Wow. What a journey. I wasn't expecting that, but let's start to unpack that. We definitely had some analysts come through the podcast over the years and through how their transferable skills and competency from the analyst role in the military helped them with their journey. But sounds like you have a varied background in your analytical skills, from your nuclear background, your variety of different analytical background, your business background. So how does that culminate into you wanting to found a company?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And it's not a simple one, but I think it boils down to a couple things. Number one, at the end of the day, we have so much data, we have really talented people, and we have some great technology today, and we have technology that's emerging. And so I don't think the problems of the past have gone away. I think that at the end of the day, we have to make a decision. Decision makers need information to take action on. And so I founded ArcQubit to really help translate here are mission sets, here are people, and here's technology that can help streamline essentially where you go from point A to point B to point C to then make a decision for your business. And if there's no return on investment for using a quantum computer, our system, our platform providing that decision intelligence should be honest enough to give you that answer.
So you mentioned quantum computers, and there's been lots of talk of quantum computers being more so on the roadmap in the distant future, but sounds like you've brought it to the present. How do we start to develop our talent pipeline to be ready to use and protect quantum computers?
Use and protect quantum computers. I love that you said that because I see it as a double sided problem. Today, we recognize quantum computers are not yet mature to quote unquote break public encryption. We also find that organizations, I don't know if you recently saw the announcement from the G7, the first international framework and call to action to the world indicating, hey, PQC migration, post quantum cryptography migration activities need to start now, especially for critical systems. So the way that I see us helping build up that workforce, doing capacity building here at home across the different levels of our communities, one of the things that we asked ourselves was just that. How do we help a high school student, for example, be quantum ready? And that what I'm talking about high school students who have their own GitHub repositories already, right? Young people who are building things. And some of those things are just for fun, and some of those things younger people are actually monetizing. And so, how do we give them the power to be quantum ready and or tools, more specifically, that help them get there? And our response to that was we need to be offering tools that don't require a quantum computing PhD. And so that resonates with me because I came from a background of no engineering expertise to I developed I learned how to write code. I learned how to work with software developers. And again, as an analyst, translating between technical domains to say, hey, here's an analytic that's going to solve XYZ problem. We designed our platform, Quantum Drift, specifically to address this idea that why do I have to have a quantum PhD to either connect to a quantum computer and or to assess if my code is PQC ready? So we developed very simple capabilities, but integrated. Even a high schooler can go onto our platform, scan their GitHub repository, and they can understand where they need to what cryptographic algorithms they need to update. So I'm really proud of that, Christoph. That's just one way that we're working on, again, developing the tools to accelerate not just awareness, but then adoption of best practices. And I think there's a lot of other great tools out there. It's just, is it accessible at $20? Or $50. That's what we're building.
So when you talk about being quantum ready, there's the having the protection in the encryption algorithm, but then there's also being coded to be able to run on a quantum computer. How do we help coders even be able to refactor their code, their mind to this new mindset of coding in these ones, zeros, and in betweens?
Yeah. I don't think there's a one size fits all answer. I think that the community and even us, to be transparent, we're still trying to figure out what is that formula that enables, empowers users to get there faster. Why do I have to spend 6 months figuring out how to program a circuit? Shouldn't I be able to have an AI agent program a circuit? Shouldn't I be able to have essentially capabilities that accelerate that workflow from, okay, right now it's 90% manual. To answer your question, is okay, how do we get, how do we accelerate their workflow so then they only have to spend 20% of the time doing that manual work? I think that is the best course of action given that we cannot rely on AI to do 100% of the work. We always have to go back and check. And that's my response to that is understanding too, being self-aware of what are your strengths and weaknesses? What are the strengths and weaknesses of your team? And then find the right capabilities to augment that workflow is how we're going to accelerate quantum computing adoption.
Yeah, I always emphasize human in the loop as being part of that conversation when working with clients as they adopt AI, because there's so many gaps in current AI adoption. One, the data that has been trained in, two, the speed that we're adopting it with. There's half I don't think there's a lifetime that you could be able to validate the code as we've been traditionally doing it to see if every single line of code will work perfectly as we've been doing it. So we need to keep the human in the loop as we look for biases, as we look for errors, and really start to potentially prioritize the type of code and the risk levels that we might want to take based on the type of code that we're running.
So I have a question for you, Crystal.
Yeah, go ahead.
The title of this podcast is Breaking into Cybersecurity. So with that said, you've got in large enterprises, I was just at JP Morgan last week, large enterprises clearly connecting to quantum computers in a sandbox. And a lot of, if you look at large enterprises who are accelerating AI or using quantum computers in some capacity, right, they have big budgets to work. And they probably have cybersecurity teams that are siloed, right? The
Yeah,
PQC migration folks talk to the people connecting or innovating using a quantum computer. So my question to you is, do you think the next generation of practitioners working in computer science and specifically with quantum computers, do you think that they have to have some level of cybersecurity knowledge?
absolutely. I think cybersecurity knowledge needs to start at the middle school level. It needs to be a fundamental skill. I teach my son cyber hygiene from password protection to being careful to who you talk to, hey, this is how a threat actor might do something, and being cyber aware. And he's in middle school right now. This needs to be a fundamental skill. And when others ask for advice on how their middle schooler or high schooler should start in cyber, for me, it goes back to understanding the fundamentals and being able to troubleshoot. Even if you want to go into an AI career, because if you don't know how to troubleshoot from an analytical perspective and to break it down into its core components, even mentally, you can't make it work. I learned it the hard way with the wires and troubleshooting the wires. And then now I am just breaking down the core components. Yes, I'm not going to check if my AW instance is physically connected into a circuit, but I will check if it's running, or I will check if it's properly configured into its VNet or something like that. Like, those are the things that go through your head. Like, you check the basics. And I think those are the core components that those currently in the pipeline are missing. They're going straight from here's computer science to let me go do computer security, and you're missing the basics. And the next component that you highlighted very well is the analytical component in working with the business. You need to be infusion. You need to be infused into the business to understand the problems that you're working on and understand their pain points to help solve them. If you're working in your own silo, you'll be creating a solution that might work in theory, but won't work in practicality. And either it'll cause too much business friction, or the users will find a way around it because you're just causing them too much headaches.
Agreed. And I love that you brought up in your own way this idea that the critical thinking doesn't get ripped out of the day to day. Is actually becoming so much more important that we have critical thinking and a systems engineering mindset when approaching problems. Now, if there is one piece of advice or one of the things that I'm really passionate about, especially putting out there, if you're interested in being part of this next generation of compute technology and playing in that playground and innovating and getting your next gig at a big company, and even small to medium sized businesses are now becoming aware of this. I mean, they have to. I would say that getting into cybersecurity or having that foundational cybersecurity knowledge was one of the greatest gifts that I had, because it forced cybersecurity is so fun in a sense where it literally forces you to think about, okay, what is the risk? Oh, but what is the threat? Oh, but what is, I have thousands of CVEs, but what do I really care about? If I don't have that specific asset or device or computer within my operational environment or within my business, then I probably don't care about it. How do you filter through the noise? That's what I love about cybersecurity. I would agree with you. You definitely should have one, especially as we're deploying enterprise grade systems in the quantum computing landscape by 2030. Shouldn't those be secure? I would say yes, especially if you're paying a couple $1,000s an hour to run a quantum computer.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I wish that a lot more large enterprises did, is that they worked with their local universities, talent pools to say, hey, these are the areas that we're looking to grow, and start to work with them to develop that talent pool and infuse these are the types of skills and capabilities that we're looking for them to have by the time they're career ready, so that we can have them. And they might not all be computer science, but hey, they could be a liberal arts major with a lot of transferable skills and competencies. And then you can show them the light of computer science and they go, oh, whoa. And then you take all the skills and competencies that are all transferable, and look, you've already enabled them to and empowered them to hit the ground running with those skills and competencies.
Oh yeah, some of the best, and you might agree with this, some of the best cybersecurity practitioners or philosophers on in their spare time.
So let's take a step back to this company that you're starting today. you had all these roles, you're evolving, you worked for all these companies. It sounds like most of them were their individual contributor roles, were their team leader roles. What was the makeup of your career before you decided to become a founder?
I started off in the military, and my first taste in leadership in 3 years made E5 sergeant, which, if anybody's listening to this and has been there, what I'm talking about energetically here, it's almost like a fantastic role to have because you really get to empower others underneath you. But then you're really put in situations where you have to practice situational leadership and be able to manage up and be that linchpin. So I would say that it was that experience being at the NCO Academy in Fort Bragg, having the opportunity to deploy and see other leaders do what they do gave me a different perspective than most. By the time I got to the working at the national laboratories, my mentality was, yes, mission first. And I'd work all kinds of hours because crazy hours, just because I was curious. I was learning a lot while building different solution delivery pipelines. And that's something I'm proud of. But I would say my proudest moment in the leadership role was when I made it to line management. Being a line manager, the best day ever was getting 4 people promoted. I did take a step back to be an individual contributor because I love the science and I love transitioning science into operations, research to operations, and vice versa, taking operational insights back into research. So I became, fast forward, I transitioned and worked at San Diego National Labs, became a principal cybersecurity engineer there, and started off doing a lot of attack surface research for different entities, and then transitioned my time to doing more international capacity building work, specifically working with researchers around the world on R&D type things. But
Mhm.
then I'd turn around and work with, as the SME, subject matter expert, whatever that means, working directly on cybersecurity regulations. And then how do we get facilities and operators on the ground to adopt and meet the regulation where they're at? In summary, Christoph, I think I've had the privilege really to serve in those different roles. And while I really loved my work as an individual contributor, I realized that I love building the teams, the
Mhm.
people, aligning that to the mission and technology. It can be dual use, which is why I started this company. Is I wanted to build great technology, but also figure out ways to deliver back to the homeland.
Okay. With the last couple minutes, I just wanted to leave it as a open call to you. What tips and advice would you give to someone in your shoes that would be starting out their career or that would be mid journey in their career looking to potentially grow their career in cybersecurity?
I would say that computer science skills, obviously, really great skills to gain, but at the same time, if you put yourself in the right roles, you're also going to get a lot of experience. Give yourself some grace because you're going to drink from the fire hose of very technical concepts, right? And we can only absorb so much of that at a time, and it comes with reps. The other thing I would say is if you don't know something, Google it. If you don't know something, in the era of ChatGPT, OpenAI, people are now referring back to their tools and trying to figure out themselves. Do that. Stay curious. But then recognize that wherever you're getting your information from, you have to go back and corroborate, confirm, contextualize. What does this mean in the real world? And if you see an industry expert or someone who is in the shoes that you want to be in 5 years, go talk to that person. And third, last but not least, more important, is think about ways to redefine success. And if anything else, when pursuing either a career or building a company, relationships come first. We're more connected than ever, but relationally disconnected. And so building that trust, building that relationship is the first step to then building something great or solving really hard cybersecurity problems. The latter comes easier when you have that connection with others.
Wow. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast and sharing your journey with us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Christoph.